There is a strange truth that waits for you in the quiet spaces of adulthood. A truth neither society teaches nor the world celebrates. It is whispered only in moments when life slows down, when the noise fades, and you begin to hear yourself again. Carl Jung once said, "Life really does begin at 40. Up until then, you are just doing research." And as the years pass, those words stop sounding poetic and begin sounding painfully accurate, because something happens around 40, a turning, a quiet cracking, a shift in the inner architecture of the soul. It is the moment when the first half of life collides with the second, when the persona you built begins to feel too small for the magnitude of the person you are becoming. And whether you are 25, 35, 40, or far beyond, this narration is for the part of you that knows you were meant to live more deeply than the world ever taught you. In Jungian psychology, the first half of life is a construction project. You learn to build a persona, the mask you show the world. It is necessary, even beautiful in its own way, a bridge between your inner world and the demands of society. You learn to follow rules that were given to you before you understood them. You chase dreams that may never have been yours. You measure yourself against standards that were whispered into your childhood ears by parents, teachers, cultures, expectations. You pursue success because you're told that success defines you. You pursue acceptance because being rejected feels like death. You pursue love because loneliness feels like failure. You pursue stability because chaos feels like the enemy. And you believe with all your heart that the point of life is to become what others will finally approve of. This is the research phase, a long experiment in trying to meet the world's demands before you ever stop to ask, but what about mine? In your 20s, you think clarity comes from ambition. In your 30s, you believe it comes from achievement. But then you approach 40, and the soul begins to ask different questions. Not how do I fit in, not who should I become, but who am I beneath all this? Approaching midlife, something subtle begins to happen. The mask you've worn for decades becomes heavy. You start noticing the space between who you are and who you pretend to be. Jung calls this tension the call of individuation, the moment the self pulls you inward, toward authenticity, toward wholeness. You begin to feel discomfort in places where you once felt certainty. The job that once impressed others now feels like a strangely decorated cage. The relationships you maintained out of habit begin to feel like rooms you have already outgrown. The goals you pursued for approval now feel strangely hollow. You sense that something inside you wants to breathe, to expand, to live on its own terms. This is the moment many describe as a midlife crisis, but Jung saw it differently. He saw it not as a collapse, but as a birth, because the first half of life was external, but the second half is inward, deeper, truer. At 40, your shadow arrives, not as a monster, not as a punishment, but as the guardian of everything you abandoned, forgot, suppressed, or sacrificed to survive the first half of life. The shadow is made of every truth you silenced, every talent you buried, every desire you minimized, every emotion you avoided, every dream you told yourself was unrealistic. It is the container of the unlived life. And at midlife it comes knocking, not to destroy you, but to return you to yourself. This is why people feel restless around 40, why they wake up with a sense of urgency, a quiet panic, a feeling that life is slipping away without ever having been fully lived. It is not fear of aging. It is fear of never having met the person inside you. Jung called the second half of life the path of individuation, the journey to becoming whole. It is the slow shedding of the persona and the gentle integration of the shadow. It is the reclamation of your soul from the world's expectations and the beginning of a life lived for truth rather than approval. In this stage, something remarkable happens. You no longer want to impress the world. You want to know yourself. You no longer chase validation. You seek meaning. You no longer ask, what should I do? You ask, who am I becoming? And for the first time, you begin to feel a sense of grounding, a sense of presence, as if you are meeting yourself after a lifetime of distractions. Individuation is not a sudden revelation. It is a quiet unfolding, a gentle conversation between your past and your potential. It is the soul finally saying, now that the research is complete, let us begin. The second half of life, where life truly begins. Why does Jung say life begins at 40? Because before 40, life is rarely yours. It is shaped by duties, roles, expectations, and survival. But after 40, you start wanting something deeper, something true. You begin to search not for success, but for purpose. Not for perfection, but for wholeness. Not for applause, but for inner peace. At 40, you stand at the doorway between who you had to be and who you were meant to be. You start caring less about what people think, not out of rebellion, but out of wisdom. You begin valuing experiences more than achievements, quiet afternoons more than crowded rooms, depth more than noise, truth more than image. The first half of life is horizontal, a reaching outward. The second half is vertical, a reaching inward. And the further you travel inward, the more you discover. You were not meant to live by the script you were given. You are meant to write your own. You do not have to wait until 40 to hear the call of your deeper self. You can begin now, at whatever age you are. You can pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what part of me have I abandoned? What dream have I postponed? What truth have I silenced? What persona have I mistaken for myself? Your life begins the moment you choose authenticity over approval. It begins when you stop asking the world for permission to be who you are. Life begins when you turn inward and reclaim the parts of yourself you left behind during your years of research. Life begins when the mask cracks and the real face emerges. Life begins when you stop performing and start becoming. Life begins when you realize you were not born to be perfect. You were born to be whole. This is the quiet revolution of midlife, the sacred turning of the soul, the moment the second birth begins. And whether you are 25 or 65, the invitation is the same. Return to yourself. Integrate your shadow. Question your persona. Seek your meaning. And walk courageously into the life that only you can live. Because Jung was right. Life truly begins at 40. But the awakening can begin right now.